Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Wildcat Focus, where we look back on some of the finest moments in NMU athletics history. I'm Derek Miceli. With me today, current volleyball head coach Mike Lozier, also sophomore setter Lauren Van Remortel, and a real treat. From the 90s, we've got Jenny Long, one of the best defensive players in NMU history, and also former head coach Jim Moore. Today, we're taking you back to 1993. Truly a remarkable season for the Green and Gold. They finished that year 38-1 with a perfect conference record and culminated, of course, in this NCAA Championship match with California State Bakersfield. As we get the starting lineups going here for this first game, there's a lot to unpack about this match, about the whole year prior even. So we'll get it started here, and we'll start. I want to talk, obviously, with those who were there, with Jim, with Jenny. Let's talk about some of your feelings and thoughts heading into this championship contest on the home floor here, as everyone can see, in Marquette.
Jenny, you want me going first?
You can go first.
I will say this. I remember vividly to this. I mean, this is hard to even say, which I hadn't thought about this even to this point. I vividly remember waking up this morning. And as you said, it went back to last year. And we had lost in this match the year before, which I'm sure Jenny and I will talk about as time goes on. But I woke up and it was still dark, obviously, which doesn't make it early in Marquette. I know that much. But I woke up and all I could say was, "Dear God, please don't let it happen again." So the idea of having positive thoughts was not the best thing. I didn't have a lot of positive thoughts that morning thinking, "Oh, don't let this happen again." But this was a group that obviously didn't let it happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that day completely. I mean, I actually went to class because it was right before finals. And so I went to a class that morning, and then I went to a physics class later in the afternoon. And it was horrible because everyone was like, "Good luck, good luck." Like everyone stopping me. And all I wanted to do was just be away from everybody. And I just remember we met and we watched because hockey won the national championship in 91, and we watched their like highlight tape. And I don't know if that was good or bad. I think it made half of us more nervous because, you know, especially the five of us, we wanted it so bad. And literally there was like nothing left for us to do except to win this match. And the other thing I remember is when we stepped into that gym, we had never seen it that full. And like literally we would take a drink of water and they cheer. We put our jackets on and they're cheering. I mean, like standing ovations all over the place. And we're like, we're just warming up. What is going on? So I think that, you know, we were very nervous starting the match because we didn't want to let this whole town down.
No, well, and I would say prelude to that is that, and I talked to Mike about this, that a little bit, that was important and it started a year before. We knew we were good. We basically were ranked second in the country the year before, the entire year. And this year we were ranked first. We literally were ranked first wire to wire. We were preseason number one and we never fell out of first the entire year. But the year before we basically were second in the country the whole entire year. And when we went to the Elite Eight, Joe Blake, who was the radio announcer for hockey, decided that he was going to go out and announce the Elite Eight for the 92 championship. And Joe knew nothing. I mean, literally nothing. I think all of us would do nothing but smile to think about Joe on the airplane going from Marquette to Portland, and we were trying to literally teaching him volleyball. We're saying, you can't say bump, Joe. You have to say pass. And when you say pass and when you say dig and what's a hit. And it was hilarious, just describing this. But the thing that it literally changed, and the reason that all those people are in that gym is because Joe went. And so he broadcast both the quarterfinals, semifinals, and then the finals match. And the entire town listened. and partly because it was Joe and it was hockey, et cetera, et cetera. But he broadcast that, and he put us on the radar, and we had many more fans in '93. And, it put all those people in the stands for this match. And Joe is a big part of the reason it happened. And the whole radio station, everybody that was around that kind of surrounded it and made this. And it's the reason that there's a television broadcast of this. If it wouldn't have been for Joe going, TV wouldn't have made sure that that was on. So that was very important.
So what are you thinking in this moment here when you're sitting there right before the first serve?
I can't, in the beginning of my career, I definitely consider myself a poor, maybe if it's not poor, but a very average at best game coach. I thought I was okay in practice, but I didn't think I was a very good game coach. And I believe firmly, especially then, as I got a little bit farther into my career, the games became important, but I said, my job's done. And so I just, Jenny will, I don't know, I'm sure she may say this, but I know this will jog her memory. All I kept saying was, remember your technical keys. And so in every huddle, that's all I would say. And I would give them, they all had 3 technical keys, and we talk about those keys, and they were supposed to remember those. And I was so nervous and so wound up, all I could say was, remember your technical keys. I'll tell sort of a joke between games 2 and 3. I mean, between 1 and 2 on what the team said to me as we came out. But I'll let that go as is. So they get started. And I know Jenny remembers, obviously Jenny remembers what she said to me between games 1 and 2. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Now, this is the old Hedgecock Fieldhouse, right? Vandement hadn't been built until a couple of years later.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, none of us got to play in the new arena. Pauline and Rachel, that class did, but the 5 of us that Jim always referred to, we never played. My senior year was played at Hedgecock before they closed it.
I will say, from a coaching standpoint, we tried to come up with a matchup. We wanted Pauline matched up on their best middle blocker because we felt Pauline could handle that. And we started with a rotation, and you always run the risk that you're going to get half a rotation off. Well, then they adjusted by 1 rotation. And so we literally were half the way off of that. So that also made me pretty nervous that we didn't get the matchup that we necessarily wanted. The other thing going into this is that the night before when we played Northern Colorado, we did nothing but run combinations against Northern Colorado. I mean, everything was fast tempoed in the middle, and we did all kinds of crazy things. And we knew that Bakersfield was there scouting us, and we went out and said, let's be very basic offensively, which we rarely were in this group. And in the finals match, it looks like we're sort of a basic offensive team where we were the complete opposite of that. But we knew the night before that Bakersfield was expecting us to run a lot of combinations in the middle and things like that, and we just didn't do it. And then, of course, the one thing that we did better than everybody was pass, and in game 1, we didn't do that so good.
What do you know what the capacity was at Hedgecock? Like how many people were there?
There were over 4,000. I do know that. I know that we weren't allowed to exceed the capacity dramatically, but they had to add some stuff at the top, and they added some extra bleachers. But I think we were right around 4,100 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, because there were bleachers up in that second level that they didn't think they'd have to pull out, but they did.
Yeah, exactly.
Dang. I mean, the hardest thing to not see, like when I first start watching this, is the difference in attire.
I meant to say that in the very beginning, and I know if Stace was on this call, she said, stop looking at our spandex, because I have shown this to my teams throughout, and everybody's got to make comments on the spandex. We were all pretty excited about those, by the way.
Well, that's what I tell my teams all the time, because all they do is they get shorter and shorter and shorter. I'm like, well, you're just going back to the buns that I had to wear in high school. I
Right.
mean, literally, we were excited for these long spandex because when you dove, you didn't get like scars and stuff on your legs. Now, you know, my daughter, the shorter the better. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, they went from having to wear buns to, and I think in the quarterfinals, we actually were in a uniform that we wore buns in. So the semifinals, yeah, I think, did we not have, I thought we had one set of uniforms that we were still in buns. No, I guess not.
So I think we did laundry. We did laundry every day because we were also superstitious. I think you might have wore the same jersey all 3 matches.
No, we didn't do that. I know we didn't do that because we weren't supposed to do that one, but I do know that. Because we had to have we had our all black one. I think maybe we wore that one against New Haven, and the other, I think these 2 matches, the last 2 matches, we wore them.
Maybe, I don't know. But.
And we were doing, and I can tell you, I do know, since it's my wife, that she wore the same hair tie the entire time and never washed it. Wasn't allowed to wash it like the entire coming down the stretch. And they were all like that, I think.
We all did that. We all had the sports bra you wore. You had the hair tie you wore. You had everything.
Unwashed?
Unwashed.
Oh no, the sports bras got washed. Everything got washed. I don't know about the hair ties, but the rest of it got washed.
So I can't see, is there a score? Like, what's going on right now? Do you remember how you started this match?
Not well. I wished I had the score. I probably should pull that up. But right now we're probably down 6-3, something like that would be my guess.
You can tell by Trisha's face things aren't right.
Tell by Trisha's face.
Well, and I noticed too, there's a pretty quick pace of play here to start things off. Was this more or less what you guys tried to do, or was this, you think, a product of that nervousness and the excitement and the electric atmosphere?
I don't know if Jenny remembers this, but we had such bad officiating in our conference at that point in time that when we got into the tournament, the officials, it seemed like it was much quicker. And it was easy for us because practice was so fast that we were constantly going, that it seemed that way. But the officials, I thought, did a better job in the even now mid 90s to the mid 2000s, to where the pace of play was better. And now in the last few years, maybe the last 10 years, I think officials have let people slow that way down. And that, I think, is unfortunate. So there's one combination that we ran that was one of the few in the entire match, actually.
We didn't run a lot of combos in this one.
We didn't run hardly any in this match, yeah.
Now, what are things, like, from your guys' perspective, what are things like watching this style of play or how you guys played that have evolved in just volleyball in general from then until now?
Serving.
So, yeah. No, because no one, Heather jump serve, but hers was an old topspin. Our serving wasn't very strong.
Yeah, everybody was just trying to get it in. It's, and I told this to Jenny, and I don't know if I told this to you, Mike, that and I'm not trying to take credit for it, but it's pretty interesting because after I leave here, I go to Kansas State. So I'm in the Big 12. It was a Big 8 at the time, but in the Big 12. And all of a sudden, people started serving us anyway when we were at K-State, just serving the living crud out of the ball. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I finally was talking to Terry Pettit, who was at Nebraska. And I'm like, I was talking about, he wanted us to beat Texas so that he could win the Big 12. I'm like, why is everybody serving so tough against us? He's like, because if you don't, your offense, nobody will ever score on you. And it was regular scoring then. And offensively, that was what made this team so good. So that our hitting efficiency for the year was over 360. And at the time, it was until Penn State showed up when they were winning 94 national championships in a row. Until then, Northern had the highest hitting efficiency of any Division I, II, or III school in the history of college volleyball. And so we were pretty difficult to stay. When we were in system, and here you have a 6-1 setter, and when we were in system, it was really hard to deal with us. And so you had to, I do know that Mark and I have talked since then that they wanted to serve tougher, but they didn't still serve as tough as what everybody's serving now anyway. But the serving is the biggest thing that happened. And obviously no libero. So here's Andrea's at 6'4" and playing in the back row and actually playing well in this match in the back row.
Well, that's what I always say. In this generation volleyball, I don't play in the front row.
Right. Jenny would have been, one of the things there were three main things I wanted to say, but one of the things that people don't understand about this team, how good they really were. So if this team we played in 3 Big Ten tournaments in the spring, but going into this season. So in the spring leading up to 93, and in the spring of 93, we played in 3 Big Ten tournaments and one other Division I tournament, and we won that. And we won 2 of the 3 Big Ten tournaments. We won the Minnesota tournament and we won the Wisconsin tournament. And we went to Illinois, and it was the last tournament we were playing in. And Illinois was preseason number 4 that year in Division I. They ended up being preseason number 4. And we had to meet them in the semifinals of their own tournament. And they pulled out a kid who ended up being in the Olympics in 96. It was on the Dutch national team. That they pulled out a kid she was a senior and had graduated. They brought her back on so that they wouldn't lose to a Division II school in their spring tournament. And then she didn't even play in the finals, and they won. But they made sure they played her against us. And Jenny, who never, ever got blocked, she goes up for her first swing in that spring tournament and gets clamped nasty. It was absolute straight down. And her next swing, she aims straight up into the stands, ticked it right off their fingers and looks at me and go, well, that's a kill. And so we were really, really good. You have a national team setter in Stacy. You have a person who was considered for the Dutch national team in Andrea. Tricia was physically physically they were twins. But Jenny would have been my starting libero in 2012, no question. If it was a team that we went to the finals with in Division I, she would have been our starting libero. So she may not play in the front row, but that team was really, really good. That's all I can say. That they just physically, we were 6'4", 6'2" in the middle. Heather Koenig hit the ball as hard as anybody I've ever coached, and I think I've coached some pretty good kids. But Heather just crushed the ball. And Trisha ran a slide as good as any outside hitter I've ever seen in my entire career. And Jenny's the best passer probably I've ever coached.
Well, that's pretty high praise.
And that's considering Demetrius Ants, and I've had some people that can, and Liz Brenner, those are all pretty good passers.
I was just say that probably the other difference is, the speed of the offense, because just now everything to the pins is faster. But the one thing, and I was actually talking to Kaylee about this, is we were talking about the mass and being able to hear. And I was like, well, our offense was 100% audible. She's like, yeah, you called your sets. I'm like, no, you don't understand. The setter never gave us a hand signal. I'm like, your oppo had the first call before the serve was made, and before like a free ball or anything like that coming over, she had the first call, then the middle decided after. And I said, then the outside had to go wherever was left open. So if the oppo decided she wanted to come around on the combo, then we could swing around. We ran behind the setter quicks a lot. We didn't run front. Our fours they weren't super high, but I think that would be the biggest changes in the sets now to that the pin are a little bit faster. But, we came at you from all different spots, and no one knew necessarily where we were coming from. Now I'll say
And we-
this, I didn't necessarily Trisha went around back, once in a while I did, but there were less hands in the back. I needed hands, and then I could survive. As long as I had a big block, I was good. So the bigger, the better.
The other thing in Division II, you couldn't, in the 3 years that we were in the Elite Eight, there were 4 teams that were top 20 Division I and maybe top 10. The first year, West Texas A&M had 2 Brazilian national team players that were just ridiculously good. And they were really good. At the same time, you have Portland State, who they used to do was kind of the simulated Olympics within the national team. And Portland State had 3 kids that were on those teams. And then you had Bakersfield. So Felicia, who is the middle that's on here, I don't know what Felicia's number 6 right there, was actually the Big Ten Freshman of the Year at Iowa. And Felicia, who is the middle, I think she's 2 or 12 or whatever that is. Felicia could touch 11 feet. And I'm not exaggerating. She could touch 11 feet. It was the highest kid touching till I got to Texas with Aaron Aldridge. But 14, yeah. So she could touch 11. That team was, and then you had us. So there were 4 teams that were for sure top 15, if not top 10 Division I programs at the time. And so the level of play amongst those teams was really, really high. And it was so hard for us to play other teams because they couldn't compete with us.
Yeah, I imagine that given the level you have on this team, that practices were sometimes more competitive than matches a lot of times.
That's the understatement of the world. One, you have Lozier and you have Stace as the 2 setters on each side. Probably the 2 best setters in Division II's history are going against one another every day in practice. And I'm telling you, they were handicapped. The starters were handicapped big time in all the different Walsh drills we had. And it is what made this team so special. And I guess I'll say the other thing that was the second part of, or one of the other 3 things that I was going to say, is that Jenny wants to say that how mean and tough they were. And in practice, when you cross the lines, it was absolutely brutal. And it started with Stace. The reality is, I don't know how PG I'm supposed to be here, but the reality is Stacy was so overtly competitive, but you had Jenny and Heather for sure that were equally, if not more competitive, but they just weren't quite as vocal. Heather was probably a little more vocal, but Jenny was as tough as anybody, but Stacy would just go off on everybody. And everybody would come up to, they'd be down in the locker room and they'd go, well, Stacy's such a bitch. And Jenny would go, yeah, I know, but she's right. So shut up and do what you're supposed to do. And so it allowed that team, instead of having somebody to complain about, and Gomi, when you look at Andrea, she looks like she's really tough. She looks like she's really mean. She is the wimpiest human maybe we ever played with. Anytime somebody'd yell at her, she'd cry. She'd get hurt, she'd cry. She'd scrape her knee, she'd cry. She was hilarious. But when she learned to compete, she was really, really good. And that group taught one another how to compete. And, Stacy Metro doesn't exist without Jenny Long. I've said that forever. And it was because Jenny would sit there and people would complain about Stace. She was tough and she was hard on everybody. The story I told Michael is that they're in practice one day and people are serving and and Stacy's having to move 2 or 3 feet to set. And she just screams at Trisha, and Jenny's like, you got to pass the ball better. And Trisha finally turns to her and says, well, all right, smart ass, you get over here and pass it. And so Stace goes back and they serve her and she passes this ball on a dime. I mean, you couldn't toss it better. And she looks at Trisha and she's like, that's how you do it. And instead of Trisha whining and pouting, she had nowhere to go. She's like, okay, I guess I better pass the ball better. And those are the kinds of things they were able to do. But they were sweet human beings. You need to know that. What were you going to say, Jen?
But Stacy couldn't do that twice in a row.
Not in a chance could she do that twice in a row. Never. That's for sure. I mean, that's just for sure. But I will say that, you know, they really were. Gomi's one of the sweetest people I've ever known. And Trisha's adorable. And so here we lose this, by the way. We lose game one, and it's bad. And it's panic time. So, but I did want to say they were great people. So we'll get to the story between games 1 and 2. I don't want to keep talking all the time because I'm the only one talking. But
no, this is good. I mean, you're the one that was there. Oh,
here we lose 15.
If you look at Bakersfield, they're playing music and the whole Bakersfield team is over there dancing. So needless to say, we 100% saw them dancing, and our only loss all year was to Bakersfield at Portland State.
Right.
And we played awful. At Portland State, we played awful. We wanted to be undefeated so bad, and we played tight. And when we saw them dancing and doing that, it just like flipped a trigger that it was like, this is not happening again. And the funny thing is between the first and second set, Jim didn't talk to us. He was trying to get that matchup correct. So all three coaches really were in a huddle trying to figure out to get that matchup right. And it was just, I think, Andrea, Stacy, and I really that were talking. I mean, no one else said a word. And it was basically just, you know, enough and just play. And the other thing Jim told us is, you know, 1 point at a time. And we finally just looked at each other. It's like, stop looking at the big picture. It's 1 point at a time, one play at a time. And from that moment on, I think every single serve, someone on the court said that.
So you need to know, I mean, now we're sitting down, but I didn't talk to, and when Jenny said I didn't talk to him the entire time. So we wanted the matchup, which was the whole point to set that up. And I turned to Lynn, our assistant coach, and I'm like, okay, we're going to get this matchup correct. Because we knew who would be serving, and before we didn't know who would be serving. And I said, we got to get the matchup correct. And I turned to Lynn, I'm like, give me their lineup. And she doesn't even have the middle blockers opposite one another. So their whole lineup was messed up. And I'm like, oh, you have got to be kidding me. So I literally took the 3 minutes between just trying to make sure I didn't screw our lineup up and make sure I had the right matchup. So at 2 minutes and 45 seconds, or 15 minutes to go, they had given up on me and walked out on the court. They were out on the court by themselves. And this shows you what they were like. So I walk up to them, and the 6 of them are out on the floor, and I look at them, and this is great coaching. I look at them and I say, we need to play better. And Jenny and Heather, Stacy rolls her eyes and walks away, and Jenny and Heather simultaneously look at me and go, no, shh. and I'm like, okay, I'm done. And so that was it. That is literally all I said between 1 and 2. And it's, you know, I told that story the rest of my career, saying it is one of the most proud moments of my entire career and my life, is that my goal as a coach was always to make it so that they didn't need me. And obviously they didn't need me because I was useless beyond belief. And they came out and we were a completely different group. And that was all, like she said, that was all Heather, Jenny, and Stacy saying, we're winning this match. And
this is a great story. It reminds me of one of my favorite expressions and cliches that you love to use in the broadcasting realm is diamonds are produced under pressure. And whether you fold under that heat and pressure or whether you harden and become stronger depends on what you're made of. And I like that you shared that story there because it sounds like one of those cliche inspirational quotes, but kind of what you said right there. it describes exactly that, right? It's what your team is made of and the individual character of the program that you had here.
Yep. And that is, I mean, oh my gosh, that's what made this team, is the character of the team. And it's pretty funny because there were a lot of people when we lost that first game, they're like, oh, well, now they are going to fold. It's just, they're going to fold under pressure. And not one, for 1 second, I knew we were not going to fold. I knew we could lose the match, but I knew we weren't folding. I knew it was going to be tough, but I didn't know we could turn it around the way we turned it around. And we rolled over them starting at this point. And you can see on there, we have a different look on our face in this set versus the first set.
So Jenny, would you attribute maybe that rough start to nerves being in front of a home crowd, things that they were doing differently than you expected?
It was more nerves. I think, I mean, because to start the season, literally on our media guide, we're like, we're winning the national championship. And, you know, that's all we had said. That's the last thing that we had to do. And it was our last match together. And I always talk about that core because it was my freshman year. Heather was a transfer JUCO, so she came in together. Stacy had to sit a year, so she got to play. And Tricia and Gomi, you know, it was the five of us that we went through so much. We got to the first, you know, Elite Eight together. We lost the sophomore year. And that was just devastating. I mean, I hate losing in general. I mean, you know, talking about that, we lost that match. And at the end, they give you all little replica trophies of it. And it's the box is open and they handed me my silver trophy. And I literally took the lid on it, set it on the ground. I didn't even hold it. And the second that the ceremony was done, I walked it over. My mom had driven up from California. I walked over and I said, take this home. I don't want it. And then we had like an awards thing and Jim's like, bring your trophies. I said, I don't have mine. And he got mad at me. He's like, where is your trophy? I said, I sent it home to my mom. I don't want it. You're not giving me that damn thing a second time. Because I didn't want the silver trophy. And I yelled at my mom when I got home at Christmas because she had it sitting on the TV. And I was like, can you put that thing away? I don't want it. I don't want that until it's gold. And so there was just so much determination. And I just think it was nerves in the crowd and all of it. And just, you know, the little thought that we couldn't do it, or not that we couldn't do it, that it wouldn't happen for us, was there. But it just took that match to settle down. And, you know, they didn't play great and we played awful. And all we knew is if we played anywhere close to our potential, this match wouldn't be close. And that's what ended up happening. We just kept getting better as the match went on.
Yeah, I will say that I've sort of maintained in my entire career, I make setters bad defensive players. But Stacy was awful. I mean, there's no other description. She just was a horrible defensive player. And in this match, to show you how important.
Stay home.
In this match, she decided that, oh, well, it is a national championship match and it's my last match in my career. I guess I should probably play defense. And she actually, I think it's in the third set, she makes the play of her entire career defensively. But they all went from set 2 on, they play defense as if their life depended on it. And in their minds, I think it did. So that's very true.
Maybe we need to make it to the national championship so I play some defense.
So
yeah, Stacey was notorious. She would always leave early and leave the corner, and then she'd turn and look at me like, "You're supposed to get that."
That's because 90% of the time you'd cover for her, and then when you didn't, she would like be upset.
I know, right?
well, then you enabled that.
I know.
Yeah, we both did that. We both just said, "Yeah, that's good."
And then I would just roll my eyes and turn away from her and pass the next ball, and then it'd be over.
That's right.
Yeah. Jim, how long were you at Northern before this game? When did you come into Northern?
This was my 5th year. So I started in 89. So into 89 to 93, and then left the 10 years and then came back in 03 and 04.
So obviously Northern, before this kind of run that you guys were able to produce, weren't amazing volleyball programs, right?
Yeah,
So
that's kind of the understatement.
What was your strategy to get to this point?
They had never finished above 4th in the conference ever in its history. There's so many parts to that answer. I guess when Rick called me, and I'll get to that in a second, but when Rick called me and asked me to come up for an interview, he's like, I want you to come up to interview for Northern Michigan. And I forgot I even applied for it. Completely forgot that I had applied. I was applying for every single job that opened, and I didn't know I applied for Northern Michigan. And so I vividly remembered I called my mom and I said, Mom, I got an interview at Northern Michigan. She's like, really? Where is it? I said, well, that's Marquette, Michigan. It's like, well, where's that? I'm like, it's in frickin' Michigan. I don't know where it is. And so we hang up. And she calls back about 5 minutes later. She goes, have you looked at that place on a map? And I'm like, no, why? She goes, you have to go south both directions to get to Canada. And it's true. We don't know that. And so, no one thought it could happen. And then we brought all the California, there's a lot of Californians that are out there on that floor right now. And so we brought, I remember Jenny's recruiting trip. I said, Jen, you have to come up. You have to see Lake Superior. It's just like the ocean, because here she is in San Diego. I go, it's just like the ocean. She walks out and she looks at it, and it was just absolute calm day. It was glassy as could be. And she's like, oh yeah, that's a real ocean. And literally it became Lake Superior the next day was when somebody was standing on Presque Isle and maybe it was the day after you left, was standing on Presque Isle and got hit by a wave and taken out and killed. And so we had like 30-foot swells literally the next day. As she was leaving, we had these huge waves. And so, to think that it was nowhere. And then the other thing that happened, which I thought was interesting, and I don't know if we ever told this to Jenny, when Stacy and I came back in 03, I came back early. I didn't have the boys. I came back in January, and Stacy stayed in Chico to get everything kind of shut down there and get the house taken care of and so on and so forth. So we moved back in March. I had been with the team for a couple months, and they knew me and they knew who I was married to and so on and so forth. And it's funny because when you walk into Vanderbilt's arena, her name is at the top of every one of those banners. And so she walks in the door and they even said to one another, it's Stacy Metro. I'm like, that is the person who was married, but they're like, oh my God, it's Stacy. And she asked pretty quickly, the rhetorical question. She said, why did you come to Northern Michigan? And I thought they had, at the time, I was thinking they have good answers. They were saying, we want to be on a really competitive team. We want a chance to compete with everybody. We want to do this and that. And nobody said this. And she said, if you didn't come to Northern Michigan and win a national championship, then get the heck out. And that's what those 5 kids that Jenny keeps referring to, those 5 kids, that's what they created, in my opinion. And it was an incredible, and so to think where it snows 200 inches a year, that you're supposed to go there and you're supposed to win a national championship is pretty cool. And I will say on a little side note, since Emily Carrick's in there, Emily Carrick, before Penn State had their run of being in the national championship finals every year, Emily Carrick was the first player, I guess we can say, was the first player in NCAA volleyball history to play in 4 straight national championship finals.
And she was from the UP.
And she was from the UP, yes.
That's a decent college career, to say the least.
Yeah. That's all she knew, was to be in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
A kind of funny story going back to you not knowing exactly where Northern Michigan was. We were actually recruiting Lauren. We had to essentially beg her just to come visit, just because now maps are very easily attainable and you can find out where the school is right away. And we were fortunate enough to get her up here, but her parents didn't even come because they didn't think she was going to want to come because of how far away it was. And her mom still to this day, every time I talk to her, feels so guilty that she didn't come with her daughter. I didn't think she was going to come, so I didn't want to take a day off of work to.
I went on my recruiting trip by myself. My parents put me on a flight, my first flight ever by myself from California all the way up. Had to go through Chicago. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that was my first time flying by myself too, and my mom's like, I still feel guilty about it. I was like, well, it worked out, so.
Yeah, at least I was old. My parents could go to the gate with me. That was before like all the restrictions.
Yeah.
So now you guys are kind of kicking butt at this point in set 2. You can kind of, it's obvious that, I think Jim, you touched on it. There's a totally different energy.
Yeah, the one thing that's interesting is that, and since I don't think it's because of my wife, is that, but Stacy, and I said this forever, her best match of her entire career, in my opinion, was in the semifinals against Northern Colorado. She was ridiculously good. And the rest of the team played relatively average. But this match, she wanted it so bad that she did not play exceptionally well. So to know this, she led the country in attack percentage that year as a setter. I actually had to make her dump enough balls so that she would have enough attempts to be able to lead the country in hitting. And so she led the country in hitting, but if you notice, she hasn't dumped a single solitary ball until right there at the very end. She sets a ball over to win the first set, and she didn't even dump it. She set a ball. And only the people who would understand that are those that were in the gym every day, because Kevin Hitt, who is our other assistant that's on there, Kevin had one goal in mind of every day in practice, and that was to stop Stacy Metro. The only thing that mattered was that Stacy couldn't dump on him. And so he would literally stand on the 10-foot line and just try to dig her dumping the ball. And that's all it was. And him and Rachel, that became their whole thing, was that they weren't going to let Stacy dump balls. And so Stacy offensively became so good because of that. And even when she got to the national team, they're like, that's cheating. She was that good at dumping the ball. And so, but she hadn't dumped a ball in the entire match, and that was out of nerves. And so she didn't play an exceptionally great match in this. But the other 5 that were on the floor, I thought played really, really well. Heather played great in this match. I thought Heather and Jenny played one of their best matches of their careers in this match.
I don't remember hitting very well. I remember passing. I was just, that's what I did. I do think this is accurate. I remember saying this, and I just now thought of this. Jenny passed it 3.0 after the first set. So I think every pass she had was on the money after the first set.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Another thing I've noticed here, if we talk about differences and such, is I believe you're using side-out scoring here at this time still, correct? As I've been trying to follow along. Kind of a different game than what a lot of our maybe younger people following along and such might be used to at home right now.
Yeah, I'm curious what Jenny would say to that. I'm curious what you say to that. My response is I didn't treat it any differently. Now you could score. The reality in this case, the roles at this point in time, the roles of offense and defense in volleyball are switched. So when you're on offense, you're preventing them from scoring. And when you're on defense, you're trying to score. So that's the opposite of every other sport. But even now, siding out is still so important. The other team, if all you're going to do is side out, they still can't beat you. It might end up being 900 to 900, but they can't beat you. So I didn't change a lot because I still thought it was super important to just side out, side out, side out.
I still coach. I mean, I say side out all the time. I mean, they might have the ball, but if you side out, now the bonus is if you can pass well and run your offense, you get a point. So now, consistent side out team. And someone asked me that, I think a couple years ago when we were going on our CIF run, because that's all I said. You get a couple point lead and then you just have to side out. And it was like, why do you always say side out? There's technically no side outs anymore. I'm like, there still are.
You still are. I agree.
Still are. So, but I keep forgetting, so the one thing, every time I'm serving, right in the beginning of this season, Jim had changed the lineup just a little bit. And so when I served, it was Trisha, Stacy, and Andrea in the front row, which Kevin nicknamed the Sequoia rotation. It was our tallest rotation. So one of our first matches, I think I went in, I missed my serve, and Jim, went over the sideline. He goes, "Listen, who's in the front row when you're serving?" I was like, "Okay." He's like, "You can't miss your serves this year." So, all right. So because every time I see that, every time I go back to serve, I could just see the three of them standing in the front row.
That's awesome. I forgot all about that. That's awesome. And that was a pretty good, Trisha was a very average blocker, but Andrea and Stacy's is good at natural blockers I've ever coached. And Gomi, they both were over 1 per game. I know it's individually. I think Gomi actually was 1.8 or something this year on that year that she was blocking 1.8 balls a match or a set. And we blocked a lot of balls with them there. So yeah, with Jenny playing defense and the three of them in the front row, we were okay.
Yeah, I know you referenced earlier that Gomi was soft a little bit, but man, every time they show her, I get nervous because she looks so good. She really does, man. She is intimidating.
Yeah, she is. She has an intimidating look, but she is so wimpy. But she hit the ball.
Out of the 5 of us, Gomi was like the mom.
Yeah.
She was we would kind of be going in different directions, and she's the one that would no, get in here, enough. And, she didn't coddle. It wasn't like coddling or, any of that. She was, as on point as all the rest of us, but she's really the glue that kept that core going in the same direction.
That's very true.
And honestly, when we saw her crying, it was a joke, but the second Andrea started crying, it was pass the ball perfect, Stacy's feeding Andrea. All you want to do was feed Andrea the ball. She couldn't see a thing. She's wiping her with the shirt, but every ball is going to Andrea at that moment in time.
It is. I do believe it is what made Stacy the setter she was, is that she could just read that. If Gomi was crying, that meant she was probably upset and angry. So she was feeding her every time.
Yeah. This is, so we're in set 3 right now.
Yep.
You guys obviously clearly still have the momentum. If I'm reading the room right, what's happening?
Yeah, I think we're up pretty big here. We're starting to dig balls. And one of the things that I would say is Lejeune came in this match, and she dug a couple balls that were pretty special. And it made a difference. And so she went in to serve. It might have been even serving for Gomi, but it might have been serving for Pauline. I'm not sure. But
Pauline, I think it's Rachel on that one.
Yeah, she went in and served a couple, and it made a dramatic difference. And it just sort of ignited us, and it was like, okay, at the time, here's Lejeune being a role player. But she came in, and it was like, okay. And this is when we really felt comfortable, I know, is Jenny had this long run, and they stopped passing. And when they stopped passing, we're like, and And you can see, and this is where my coaching comes in, because I saw that Jenny runs back to serve. And so we wanted to keep the pressure on them. When things were going our way, we wanted the tempo is going as fast as we possibly could.
I got to imagine there's got to be a timeout coming up here soon.
Yeah,
Things that have been going.
it's not good.
Was it like very noticeably different, the energy with the crowd, with there being so many people there?
Yes. I was going to ask you, you would need to answer, Jenny.
I mean, the funny thing is like I talk about the crowd before the match and probably through the first set. But then I think after we lost, it just kind of went quiet for us. And then it was like, okay, enough. It just has to be us. Now at the end, once we get into the fourth set, towards the end, you can tell us get tight again. Because right here, everything's kind of rolling, but then, we can talk about when we get there, but you can see the anxiety get on our faces, and you'll notice like the way we're pointing at each other. And I think it creeps back in there because then everyone was just anticipating it. But to be honest, during the second and third set, I don't remember it at all. It was just us.
Well, I will say this, that, I've had the wonderful opportunity to coach, to be part of a team that played in front of 15,000 people. And I'll say that, and I've been in some places that are pretty loud. And this was it's to this day, this is still the loudest I've ever been involved with it. People literally were screaming. And I actually remember it more in 2 and 3 because I didn't have to be, like I said, I'm not doing anything. I'm just saying stupid stuff. So I remember the crowd so much in 2 and 3 because they were so ridiculously loud. And we got on a roll and this is when we were on this roll. And right now, you couldn't hear yourself think. And so I'm trying to stay focused and everything else. And it was hard. I mean, and I hadn't been in that environment before. By the way, there's that pretty good dig. I hadn't been in that environment before, and it was ridiculously loud. And the reaction by Trisha right there is perfect. Jenny digs that ball one-handed out of nowhere, and Trisha just like smiles, like that's what's supposed to happen.
Right.
And nobody's celebrating, nobody's doing, going crazy or anything else. They're just like, yep, you're supposed to dig balls that way.
Yeah, that was incredible. Yeah, but I mean, it seems like you've created at this point, this is just a group of players that you like you said, have this expectation, right? And you're in the middle of trying to reach that goal. And it's kind of like, we'll celebrate when it's over type mentality. It's kind of what you're almost getting,
It's exactly right. I mean, we'll celebrate when it's over. I mean, I as you pay attention to this, there's a couple things that I'll try to point out as it comes down. But what Jenny said is watch them. You'll see them put one finger up to say 1 point at a time. And it's super. I mean, they are so focused. And again, even in huddles, and I may sound like I'm exaggerating, but I really am not saying anything worthwhile at all. They're doing it themselves, and they're telling who they need to watch out for, where the block needs to set up, where this is that. And I'm pathetic. I'm truly useless in this match. And I mean it. And I don't hide it. It's just that I was a spectator, a nervous spectator. But I do think the stuff that I try to do with the matchups, I think that mattered a little bit, but it was all them. I mean, it was all them. If you notice, Jenny's just serving for an eternity here.
Yeah. I was just thinking that same thing. Like, holy cow, she's going. Of course, you ruined it. You said.
Yeah, I know I did do that. But she served. I mean, I think that was something like 9 straight points or something like that. And that was a big deal that year. Heather rattled off 15 straight points at Dominguez Hills that year. So we were always having this contest to see who could run off the most points in a row. That was always a big deal.
Well, the funny thing is I tell people about our trip to California where we got there, we played Cal State Dominguez Hills in the morning. Then we played Cal State LA at night, who was ranked they were top
5.
Then we drove to Bakersfield, played Bakersfield, lost, had to turn around, drove back to Riverside.
Well, we beat Bakersfield at Bakersfield.
Oh, you're right. That's when we won.
Yeah, that's when we won.
That's when we won. And then we played Cal State San Bernardino in the morning, and they were horrible.
They were horrible, yes.
Which is so funny now, but and then UCR that night.
Right. Who was in the top 5 also.
Yeah, crazy road trip.
Yeah. So we played everybody in the top 5 almost, except we played except for Portland State. So.
Wow. How was the level of competition in the conference at this time?
Ferris,
nationally average. What are you gonna say, Jen?
I was just saying Ferris is really, but they weren't even. Did we lose a set in conference?
No. We did lose a set, and
suck.
I'll say this without saying we lost a set at Northwood. Remember that, dear? And you remember why we lost a set at Northwood?
Talk about Northwood. I've had very, very, very bad experiences at Northwood 2 years in a row.
Okay, I understand that. But Michigan Tech was also very good. So Michigan Tech was good because Michigan Tech turned around and they were the number 1 team in the country the year after this. When you guys beat them in the regional finals, they were number 1 and you were number 2, right? Yeah. So Michigan Tech had become good. But both Stacy and Jenny they came to me because they were roommates. Stacy and Jenny were roommates, and Stacy and Jenny came to me in the summer of '93. She's like, I think you should schedule that we only take 2 trips downstate for conference all year long. And I'm like, what? Yeah, they go, just put everybody on the same weekend. We'll play 2 a match. We'll play 3 days in a row. We'll play them all at once, and we'll just kill them all, and then we'll come home. We'll have more time for ourselves. So that's what they thought of the conference.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
This is a good time to bring up just a bit about just NMU's place, not only this season, not only in NMU's athletic history, but the conference as a whole. You guys were the first GLIAC member to win a volleyball championship.
We were the first East Coast, a team on the Eastern time zone to win a national championship. It's hard to think that now with Penn State doing what Penn State did, but we were the first Eastern time zone team to win a national championship. And we did that. And maybe this is a good time to say the last thing of the 3 things I really wanted to say is that, I've thought about this a lot, and I think he actually comes on. That he's in the screen here soon, but I think I'd ask the question is, who's the most important person in Northern Michigan volleyball history? And most people think that I'm going to say Stacy Metro, and certainly arguably that's the case, and it may be the case. But my answer is that it's Rick Comley. I think Rick, one, he took a chance on me, obviously, but this amount of support that he gave us was beyond belief. And that the interesting piece to them, and I'd be curious whether Jenny remembers this, that in the country went through the second Title IX push in 92, basically in 1992. And there were 10 universities that got sort of random, somehow they were supposedly randomly selected. I ended up being at 2 of the 10. But Northern was the only Division II school to have that happen to. And here we have Division I hockey. And so it made Rick actually had a courtesy car at that point in time, and none of the other coaches did. And they took that courtesy car away from Rick. And I thought, that's ridiculous. But Rick did so much, one for the athletic department, but for the volleyball program. He's the reason Vandement Arena, and then obviously President Vandement has to be up there too. I mean, they made sure that arena happened. And Brian Verrigan, who promised that we were going to fill the arena for this match, stuck his neck out financially and did that, and Rick allowed him to do that. there were so many great things. And Ann James, who was our SWA at this point in time, Barbara, who was there before, was great, but Rick made a huge, huge difference in what happened. And he also made sure he hired Mark after I left, and he kept it going. I mean, in my opinion, Rick Comley is the guy who made the volleyball program what it was and is. I think he's so important to where that's all about. And the players are obviously what did it. But I've worked for a lot of different athletic departments, and in my opinion, there is no question that Rick Comley's the best athletic director I've ever had.
Well, there's a quick rule change that's occurred. I was like, what just happened?
Exactly. Yep. There you go. Let's serve.
Oh man, I forgot about that. Wow.
Yeah.
Dang. So going into set 4 now, you're up 2-1. I know, Jim, you had kind of referenced your state of mind in the national championship the year before, that you got a little ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Really focusing on not doing that and staying in the 1 point at a time mentality.
Yeah. The year before, we're up 2-1, and we were up 8-4 when Jeff Mazzocchi called his second time out. And I had sat down, and I didn't say it to anybody, but I had sat down and I said to myself, my God, we're going to be national champions. And we weren't. So I kept I am literally sitting on the bench right now, nervous as can be, telling myself 1 point at a time. If you see, I don't do anything. I just sit there. And you don't really see me. I think that's a good thing that you don't see me, but I am doing absolutely nothing but just praying that it goes correctly. And we were absolutely dominated 2-3. So it felt a little different. I mean, the Portland State match was a ridiculously tough match. That was a 3-hour match that every single set was super close. And this was none of these sets have been close thus far. And we kind of knew that. And so I will say it felt differently. And we're off to a pretty good start to start the 4th set. So, I mean, it wasn't that I was feeling super confident, but I did feel pretty good. But I just kept saying one at a time, and I'm just sitting there trying to hide.
Yeah. What about for you guys, Jenny? You guys feel like you were really honestly sticking to that, just one at a time, like not looking ahead at all?
This whole 4th set, I think in the huddle before we went out, I think that's all Jim said to us. And I mean, between every single point, that's all, like, don't look at the scoreboard, just play, just play, just play. And I mean, especially when we hit 10, I mean, when we hit 10, you could just, like, the whole gym, I mean, that's when I remember it. It was just like, then it just got loud, and every single point, everyone just went crazy. And it was just like, okay, 1, all we need is 1, all we need is 1. But I mean, I vividly remember that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Jim, you talk, you're doing a very good job of talking of diminishing your role. But
Exactly.
In reality, though, that might have been something that is all you had to say, right? You said you established this program of athletes that are just so intense and so dead set on winning that sometimes it's just reminding them to take a breath. And that's all you have to do and get out of the way.
Yeah, and that is the case. And because they were so intense, I probably did a better job in this game because this is my 5th year coaching college volleyball at this point in time, that I just didn't think I had to interject. It probably helped them tremendously. So I'm doing everything I can to just make sure I'm just keeping my trap shut. There will be one thing in this set that I'll talk about, how I end up marrying the woman I married, that I'll talk about what happens in this. It's sort of funny. Very funny, actually. I've described this. But I mean, I knew I was nervous, but I was just kind of sitting there. So yes, it was good that I got out of the way.
Yeah, I'm glad that Lauren's hearing this too. That sometimes our job, and I'm a huge proponent, honestly, of my coaching style. And there's Rick. Right?
There's Rick, yeah. And he's obviously nervous.
yeah. He was pretending to cheer. You could tell he's very nervous. But yeah, I think if you get the job done in practice, there's very little that we have to do in terms of coaching them up outside of strategy that we really should be doing, right? If you recruit the right types of people, the right types of players that have that level of intensity that these guys are showing.
Yeah, I think that's what inspires me the most about this team. Mike has talked about it, just the intensity and drive of the players, even like off the court. I know in a meeting with Mike the other day, we were talking about things that this team did off the court to help them win a national championship. And that's something I think we've been focusing on this year, is just thinking of things that we can do that aren't even related to volleyball at all, but that would help us get to where we want to be. So.
Yeah, when Jenny came to visit a month or two ago now, the coaching staff was picking her brain about what did you guys do that was different, that set you apart, that got you to this point, because ultimately that's our goal, right? To hang another banner in Vandament. And a lot of those things that she had kind of referenced, I went right back to the team and said, look, if you want to win, here are certain things we can do to maximize our opportunity to do that. I'm not saying if we do these things, we're going to win a national championship, but these are good stepping stones and good things to implement to be successful. And a lot of it, from kind of what you guys have been describing, is the team taking ownership of it. It not being a top-down type philosophy. It's like, we're all in this together. What do we all need to do to accomplish this goal? And not just the coach dictating what happens at all times.
Jim, you're on mute.
Sorry, my fault. And when Jenny referenced that they made all the audible calls, et cetera, that's sort of my style, is that they owned this team. This is their team. This isn't my team. This is their team. And I told them that actually all the time. And I told every team that I've had, is that they determine which direction we go. And they, it's very interesting. When this team came back for the 10-year reunion in 2003, I thought I was part of the team, and it was hilarious. They came over to the house. Everybody came over to the house as a whole, came over and grabbed Stacy and said, we're going to the bar and you're not welcome. And I thought that was awesome. And I still remember, and it was because that was them, and you were over there and this was us. And I that was pretty special. And so I do think that's important. It was definitely all of them. Stacy finally dumped the ball.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So does anybody? I haven't seen the score in a while. Again,
we're probably like 10-4 or something would be my guess.
Okay. So things are starting to become a little bit more real.
It's starting to become a little more real.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine playing these last few points. I'd be so excited. I'd try to take it one point at a time, but I would just my head.
Even like looking at the jerseys, like pretty loose fitting jerseys relative to it now. Everything's so skin tight.
Yeah, these were pretty, I will say, these were expensive. and it's funny because I was talking to Kevin, who was our assistant the other day, and he was referenced the Jammin' jackets, which are the jackets that we had, and I completely forgot all about the jackets. Those were that was a big time thing, because they were awesome for being up there, because they were waterproof, but they were still warm enough. Those were good, and they just disappeared. So yeah, definitely the styles have changed.
Yeah.
The pants were not warm.
The pants were not warm. Yeah, that's for sure.
The jacket was. The pants were not warm.
Yeah, that's true. The pants were not warm.
Yeah, and then a story I told you, Jim, yesterday that I think bears repeating. When Jenny did come, it was with a recruiting visit with her daughter, and I called public safety because this was during the time of, it is during the time of coronavirus, so there were a lot of protocols, and they would lock all the buildings. And so I called public safety, and they were a little hesitant to unlock Hedgecock for us, which is now a financial, like where admissions are and financial aid. And then we kind of dropped that, hey, Jenny Long, who was on the national championship team, she's the one that's here. And his demeanor completely changed. He, I guess, played on the basketball team the same time you were there and couldn't be more excited to open the building. And I think, and the number of times, that people have unprovoked approached me, knowing I was a volleyball coach, to tell me that they were at this exact game is pretty incredible. I mean, I imagine I'm, in the dozens at this point, which is a really kind of cool piece about just touching on Marquette and like how much they care about this volleyball program, because you go to a lot of places, volleyball is a secondary sport for sure, but at Northern in particular, people are extremely passionate about it, which is great. It puts a little bit of pressure on us. You got to win, but I think it's overall a very positive thing.
Okay, that was the one that I want. That play was the one I want to talk about. That, and I'm sure Jenny will remember this. That it was a long rally, and Stacy once again decided she had actually digs a ball. It might be late. I haven't seen it, but she digs a ball that goes into the bench, which is the greatest defensive player of her career. But that's a ball that she just decides not to dig, and I jump up. And if you notice, that's very few time. I don't know that I ever got off the bench besides that. I just jumped up and I yelled at her. I'm like, you got to dig that ball. And she turns around. She said, sit the F down. And I turn around to the bench. I'm like, did you hear what she just said? And Kevin, who actually went from kindergarten and graduated with Stacy, turns around and said, yeah, just sit down. There's nothing you're going to say to her. It was like, sit down. And how I end up marrying that woman, I don't know. But she literally told me to just, in the match, tells me to sit down. And that's how it went. So that's the way it goes, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Lauren, I don't think we're quite at that relationship yet.
That would not be a suggestion that you make. You better be the National Player of the Year before you do.
Yeah.
That's the deal I'm willing to make. If you become National Player of the Year, you're allowed to one time.
And she already was twice by this time. So.
Yeah, you can kind of look in the crowd and kind of get a sense that things are starting to play themselves out.
Yeah, as we get close, and I better say this beforehand. We're still a few rotations away from getting there. I know, because Heather's in the front row. I don't know. I'll wait. So we're at 8-6. So we're up.
8-6.
I'll wait for the story a little bit.
Another thing I noticed too was, I don't know if you call them spandex, but the black spandex, Northern would never be wearing those today.
Yeah, no black. No.
Well, that one were actually forest green.
Oh,
great.
In a way, we had, when I was a freshman, we had like the bright green. And then when we went to these uniforms, we got a white, a black. We all wanted the black. We pushed for the black. I don't think Conley liked the black. We said no to yellow, and we wanted the dark green. We didn't want the bright green. So that was more us. We basically said, Stacy and I said, Jim, we don't want this, we don't want this, and we don't want this. We want this and this and this. And so, yeah.
I do like the dark green though. I think that's it.
I liked the dark green
Mm-hmm.
over the bright green.
I wish we could do black and not yellow, but
Ain't happening.
I understand.
Jenny and Stacy never got what they wanted.
So kind of going fast forwarding to like next year, obviously Mark is the head coach and wins another national championship. How much dialogue did you guys have back and forth from when he took over all the way through that kind of run that they had even?
Quite a bit, actually. And I hope that I think I was part of that. I think Mark would say this that I was a pretty decent part. I did everything I could to convince him to take the job because I wanted this program to continue to succeed.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool kind of relationship to have, that you literally had just played him the year before and then he took over that next year.
Yeah, and Dave Rubio was at Bakersfield before that, and then so Dave and I were close, and Mark was the assistant, and so we'd known one another, and so Dave was kind of Division II, so we all kind of knew one another, so that was a pretty big deal.
And then so how many of these girls were seniors at this point? I think
there's 4 of them, and basically all 4 of them are all Americans. There's 4 seniors.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I told you when I was up there, the hardest part transitioning from this year to the next year was really I was the only all-around starter that came back. So, but it was more like because it was so competitive and the 2 teams were so like close across the net, I was going into a brand new world instead of them kind of coming under the net that direction. So it was different.
I don't mean to interrupt, but so if you notice in that, because this will go to the last point, I'm giving I was still giving serving signals. By the way, I stopped giving serving signals a long time ago. But I was giving serving signals and telling her to go down the line. And this is when you could only serve from that side of the court. But I was telling her to go down the line because that's where they'd struggled passing. So I just wanted to set that as the stage for kind of what's going on. And Jenny's doing a great job serving. By the way, that's Andrea that's on the floor. That's somebody that's 6'4", rolling underneath the net to try to get balls.
She loved to go to the floor.
She loved to go to the floor. She did love it.
Didn't you play them? It was CSU Bakersfield again the following year, right? In the 94 championship as well? Correct. At their place.
Yeah. Because I joke, I was telling my daughter about that too. That was like the way it went. We went down to Texas, West Texas A&M won, Portland State lost. Then it was at Portland State. We lost to them. They finally won. Then it came here. We won at home. And then Bakersfield was like, nope, we're hosting it that next year. They made sure they got it because, it was their year.
What I assume, was it a fall sport still at this point?
Oh yeah.
Was it fall sport? So are you guys playing, like, is there snow on the ground at this point?
I meant to mention that earlier. This was an odd year. So I used to always say, by the 1st of December, there's always snow. There was always snow in Marquette, especially the first 5 years I was there. And it was there till the end of April. I was exaggerating, till the end of March anyway. But there was snow, and during this tournament, we had hardly any snow at all, and there was very, very little on the ground. And it was actually like in the 40s, so it wasn't even cold. And here's Trisha pointing 1 point at a time.
Yeah, because I can imagine Cal State coming in. If it had been a standard Marquette December, it would be a nice competitive advantage for you guys.
Yeah, they were prepared. They bought all big brand new jackets, and they wanted to say how cold it was and everything else. So we're like, fine, freeze to death. We don't care.
Well, I remember we were nervous if we were even going to get the bid because they didn't want to come to the cold.
Yeah.
Right.
The committee, we knew that we had to, I think BB even had to bid higher because we were really afraid that they weren't going to bring it up to where we were at.
Right.
Yeah, which makes sense.
So we're getting close. Stacy does not dig another ball again right there. So I didn't jump off the bench and yell at her because I was like, okay, I'm supposed to sit down. So I just stood there and went, okay, shook my head. There's another one. I believe right now it's 13-8, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can speak to it more than I could. Is there a difference in momentum between rally and side out scoring?
I don't think there is.
No.
That's my opinion. I don't think there is.
Yeah.
But I mean, first of all, I've had a chance to work with a super high profile statistician who did some stuff when we were at Oregon. 1310. And if you ask him, there's no such thing as momentum. It doesn't exist. And so it's, but I think you would get on rolls, but you do that so much. The reality in rally scoring, it's runs of points is what determines who wins and loses. And it's the same thing. And runs of points are scored when you're serving. And obviously it's the same thing here. It's just runs of points. And when you get runs of points, you win. And when you don't, you lose.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting that the first 3 sets have been just absolute blowouts.
Just absolute blowouts.
This one's a little bit tighter.
And what Jenny's saying, that they got a little more anxious and started thinking about it a little bit more. And that's
made a difference. We're out of system. A couple of those passes have been out of system. They started serving way to the sidelines.
Yep. Okay, so Tricia serves this ball. Well, okay, and so I'll hang on here.
Yeah, I know the result of this, but this is like so.
Trust me, I'm sure it is for Jenny too. It is for me too. So now, okay, they're going to make a substitution. And watch the chicken coach who is telling everybody to serve down the line. And Trisha's serving, who is by far our weakest server.
Well, that serve just now was the easiest serve she'd ever served.
And if you see my hand, I had a fist, which is serve it dead to the middle of the court. And I think I do it again. And I just gave it to her again. So I actually tell her to go cross court and go away from the person who just came in. Because I'm afraid Trisha's going to miss this serve. But she goes right where she's supposed to go, which was awesome.
Awesome.
That's Brian Berrigan, by the way. And that's Angie. And there's Joe Blake on the side.
Incredible.
By the way, I can't believe it. I bent down to pick up my notebook, which wasn't there, that I still have actually, that I still use. And I didn't know this, and I don't know how it got picked up. I don't know how I got it back. It was 30 feet past the in line. I'd just thrown it. I didn't jump in there with the players. I don't think I never thought that was my place. But I threw my clipboard and I didn't even have a clue that I did it.
Wow.
And I didn't know how I got it back.
Good assistant coaching, probably.
Yeah, maybe. And if you notice, still after they'd won, the one thing that they did was say, NMU, thank you. And even after they won, they still did it.
That's awesome.
It's so awesome looking back at this. And then now, I imagine, Lauren, right, this is motivation, because we're also looking into the future in some ways, right? Because this is now, we're going to replicate this in the upcoming season. Doesn't it give you that feeling of like inspiration, motivation? Like, wow, I want to do this too.
This is definitely the goal.
Yeah, it's nice having this tangible thing, this video of it happening. Not only it happening, but it happening on our campus to reference and kind of set the stage. A lot of times, you have to speak to like trying to bring a program to that point. We've clearly, been to the top of the mountain. It's just a matter of getting back.
And I'm sure we're not going to watch the entire ceremony, so I do want to say this because the woman who's on this call with us is very special to me. But in this lineup, as we do this, like Jenny said, she had lost a lot in the finals. And I absolutely knew that she had taken that second place trophy and said, put it where I'm not going to find it. And as we went through the huddle, or went through the lineup, and I gave everybody a hug, it's something I remember forever. I went to Jenny and I said, you didn't come in second this time. And she says, it's about time. And that can be seen in this. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. It was amazing, like, as we stood there, that everyone stayed. It was like, okay, it's over. Like, everyone stayed and waited for us to get our trophies. And I mean, people just didn't leave. I mean, we were there for hours after this match. It just, everyone wanted to say congratulations, and it didn't just clear out.
Yeah.
There was still probably over 1,000 people after we come out of the press conference, and they were still there. So we had to disappear for 10, 15 minutes, and there were still way over 1,000 people still there waiting for us.
Yeah, I can't imagine, especially having been so close the year before. And there's a lot of pressure, to do it again, or to get to that point again, and then to finally get the W has got to feel like, almost probably relief on your end a little bit there, Jim. Just getting it done after, the previous year being so close.
At the start of the Elite Eight, I said, I do not want, I want you to feel joy when this is over. I don't want you to feel relief. And Tricia, in the press conference, she says, it's a relief to get this over with. But he spoke for everybody, because it was. There was just, we had put in so much pressure on ourselves to make sure this had happened. There is no lie. It was, had we not won, it would have been a disaster in our opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we struggled so much in the first set.
Yeah.
It was, the concept of getting back to this match didn't scare us. Like, we knew we were going to be back in that match. That wasn't even a question. It was, were we able to get over the hump and get it? And I think that's why in that first set, being at home with all those people there to watch it, now if we lost, we weren't just letting ourselves down. It felt like we were letting everybody down. And we just had to take a deep breath and, let it go.
And that's President Vandermint, by the way, those people.
That's what I was going to say. I only have seen him in bronze plaque form. But it sure looks like him.
By the way, Mike, Marlene Piper is behind Ann James. And in my opinion, Marlene Piper is the best volleyball coach in United States volleyball history, including Doug Beal, including Bill Neville, including Marlene was at Cal State, was at UC Davis at the time, and they had 0 scholarships. And they actually beat us in '92 in the Air Force tournament, in the semifinals of the Air Force tournament, which was crazy. And they had no scholarships. They were just ridiculously good. Marlene was an unbelievably great coach.
So this is the trophy that you locked up and never took out, Jenny, that they're all getting at this moment?
No, this is the 3rd or 4th place trophy.
Oh, okay. So they had all the teams there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never played in the 3rd or 4th place. I coached the 3rd or 4th place match, but I never played in it.
Okay.
And I think what we'll do here now is skip ahead to that final trophy presentation.
Yeah, if it's possible to get to where we're taking them, that'd be great.
Yeah, and one of the dads made these shirts for us. so that we had championship shirts.
That's a big move. That's a big move.
That's the all tournament team, so they might have skipped past them getting the trophy, would be my guess.
38-1.
I will brag on my wife, because that's that. She is the only, in every tournament she ever played in her entire career, well, in her Division II career, she was the most valuable player of every single tournament. It's the only player I've ever known that's the case.
Dang.
And so she was the most outstanding player in this thing too.
So you think they did this? We might have missed us getting our trophy at this point?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, now we're going to go into the.
Yeah, Catherine, are you able to go back to the trophy ceremony?
Somewhere in there, eh?
Or that's way too far, I think. Oh, no, maybe not.
That's just getting them.
Oh, this is it. There she got her gold one.
Who's that?
Trainers.
Almost you.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you know this, Jim, but we recently renovated our locker room, and we have the championship photos from both 93 and 94 commemorated on our wall now, which is
That's awesome.
a very cool thing to be able to do. And I think I had mentioned yesterday, it kind of sets the tone for this program of expectations, and the first thing you see when you walk in is these two national championship teams. It's pretty special, and it does apply a certain amount of pressure, but if someone isn't up for that kind of pressure, then they shouldn't be a part of this program because of that expectation,
That's correct. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah.
That's when we handed those out. That Dad came and gave them to me. I'm like, God, if you'd have showed me those beforehand, I would have killed you.
Yep.
Well, again, everyone, current volleyball head coach Mike Lozier, also sophomore setter Lauren Van Remortel, and two who were there, part of that remarkable 93 team, Jenny Long and Jim Moore. Guys, it's really been fun watching this with you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us. That place means so much to all of us. I know that much.
Thank you very much. It was fun reliving. I was nervous because it's been so long and the volleyball's changed so much. I kept telling Katie, I'm like, okay, I don't know how good this is going to be.
That was extremely high level volleyball. It doesn't matter what era that took place in. That was ridiculous.
So there it is, the thrilling finale of that magical 1993 season. NMU losing only 9 sets the entire year. They finished 38-1, of course, with the national championship being that final 38th win of this remarkable season. Hope you've enjoyed watching this NMU Classic with us. Make sure you follow along on the NMU social media channels and on Facebook, on YouTube, all that, to keep up with the different Wildcat Focus sessions that we're going to be having over the coming weeks. And I suppose that'll do it. This is Derek Miceli saying thanks for watching with us.